Hello and welcome to part 3 of the cute little turtle series here on Blender Cookie. This is David Ward, and when last I left you we had just finished sculpting out the body and the turtle shell. So now we're going to get in and open up his eyelids and add an eyeball in there, and then we'll go into the sculpt tool and add some little scale effects around different places. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump in here and tell you what, let me start my screencast there. Okay, just so you can see what keys I'm pushing. And we'll tab into edit mode, and I'm going to select a vertex on each of the eyelids there, and then Control L, so we have both of the hemispheres, so it's sort of a sphere selected. So when we Shift S and put our cursor to selected, it's going to put the cursor right there in the center of both of those eyelids, which would be the center of the eyeball itself, if it were there. So now, what I want to do is select one vertex on the eyelid, the top one, and hit period on my numpad, so I'm rotating around the 3D cursor, and I'm going to rotate that back until it's open. And then I'll do the same thing on the bottom lid, so rotate that down now. And now we have where if his eyeballs were in there, he'd be able to see out. But, as you can see, it looks kind of weird because the inside corner of the eyelids are, pretty much halfway into the head, but the outside are plainly visible. So if we're to zoom in right here, you can kind of see some weirdness going on where they're overlapping and kind of occupying the same space. So one way to get around that is to go ahead and select both of those, and we'll rotate those on the Z-axis to where they're both kind of, just barely going into the head like that. So I'm going to go ahead and save this there, part 3. And since my 3D cursor is still right there in the center of them, I'm going to Shift S, or not Shift S, but Shift A, and I'm going to add a UV sphere. And I already have the segment set to 12 and 12, and then the size right now is 0.25, but that's a little bit big, so I'm going to set that to 0.1. That's a little bit too small, so maybe 0.15. And that's almost about right, but we'll tab into edit mode and just scale it up manually, about like so. And then we're still rotating around the 3D cursor, so I'm going to hit R to rotate 90 degrees on the X-axis. So it rotates that down. Oops, R90X. Enter. Okay, I failed to hit enter earlier. So now we have the eyeball looking forward. And I'll go ahead and change the shading to smooth. And tell you what, go ahead and add a subdivision surface modifier to it. And I'm going to tab into edit mode. And just for now, I'm going to add a loop right here. And then we're going to add a loop right there in between those two. Okay, and then just kind of scale it down a little bit and maybe move it into the eyeball, just so we get a visualization of where the iris and pupil are going to be on the eye. So now I want to go ahead and put one on this side too. And in times past, I would show you that we would just move the eyeball itself to the center and then tab into edit mode, select everything, and move it over like so, and then use a mirror modifier on it, and it'd pop it in there. And that works, but there's another way we can do it. We'll just undo a couple of times. Okay, so I can see where I'm at there. And one more. Okay, and now we'll go ahead and add the mirror modifier again. And it mirrors there according to where the object's origin is, which right now it's that orange dot. It's the center of the eyeball. And so if I go into edit mode and move it around, you can see it's mirroring according to where that orange dot is. Now, that's by default. You can tell it you want to mirror it around another point, and you do that right here, mirror object. So we'll click in there and say I want to mirror it around the turtle body, and so it mirrors it according to the center of the turtle body rather than the center of its center itself. So now we have the eyeballs right there. Okay, so we'll go ahead and save that. That's as far as we're going to go on the eyeballs for right now. We'll get back in later and add a nice lens and everything on them so they render out nicely. But for now, we're going to be done with those for this particular time and span and time. I don't know. And now I'm going to go ahead and let's select the body, and I'm going to go ahead and apply the mirror. Actually, tell you what, before we do that, let's jump in here and add some seams so we can get him textured up later, and it'll be easy because we just have to do it half. Just have to do half of the seams now instead of, after we apply the mirror, we have to do both sides. So now we just do one side, and then the mirror, apply it, will automatically have these seams on the other side too. So, where do I want to put these seams? Let's put one right there, and instead of going all the way down the whole side and everything, I'm going to stop right here and go under the mouth, like so, and then I'm just going to go ahead and deselect all the rest of these. Oops. So just hit C, and it opens up kind of the selection paintbrush, as I like to call it, and then hold down Alt to deselect. And if you just click and drag, it selects, but if you hold down Alt, it deselects. So let's go ahead and select that one too. Tell you what, let's just go to Edge Select Mode so we can kind of see a better representation of what that's going to look like there. I'm going to Control E, and we're going to mark a seam. Okay, let's do the same thing around the inside of the mouth. Let's go around this edge right there. I'll go Control E, mark that seam. And then I want to go ahead and separate the tongue from the rest of the inside of the mouth, so we'll turn off the mirror for now. And see, this is another part where it's easier to do before you apply the mirror. And let's select the loop around the tongue. That one there will work. And then we'll select a few up the middle of the bottom of the tongue. It's good to put seams around places that aren't going to be visible very often. And around the bottom of the tongue is obviously not going to be. So we'll go ahead and mark that seam. Okay, now we can go ahead and turn the mirror back on. So we got the head pretty well set. Let's go ahead and do we'll include the back of the head with the neck. So since the back of the head takes up quite a bit of space, we'll go ahead and put the seam on the neck down the middle, about right there, down to about where the collar of a shirt would go. So we'll say one more, and then just select that loop right there. And go ahead and Control E, go ahead and mark that one. I'll tell you what, let's tab out and get the turtle shell hidden so we can kind of see the body a little bit better. And now I want to add another seam right there around his arm. Okay, Control E. And let's add a seam down the middle. Kind of the same selection we had selected earlier with the head, but we're going to deselect everything once again. Deselect all this. Come in here, make sure we're all the way up to there we go. Okay, one other thing you can do, kind of visualize. Right now, we have the subsurf on there, and even though we're in edit mode, it's still showing the subsurf under the kind of the cage of the low polygon version. So if we hit this button here, use modifier while in edit mode, go ahead and turn that off. We can see our seams a lot better. So now we can see that they are connected to the other seams. Comes on all the way around. Good. Go ahead and mark those. And then let's just add a seam. We'll come down the belly, down the front. Usually I go around the back, but in this case we'll just go around the front. Down to about right there. And then we'll add one selection down over to where we're going to add a seam around the top of the leg. Control E, go ahead and mark that. And then go ahead and select that loop around the top of the leg. Same thing, Control E. And then instead of cutting the legs in half like we did with the arms, we'll just select this inside seam there down to, we'll just select down to there and then deselect that guy. And we're going to Control E, mark that. And then tell you what, let's add a seam right there around the back of the foot. Control E, mark that, and then try to select everything around the bottom border of all the toes and everything. So like that, kind of a footprint type of selection. So we'll go ahead and mark that. And tell you what, just to keep things clean, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Instead of having the leg seam on the side and then mismatching with the foot, let's go ahead and select this edge as the seam, of the leg rather than the one on the inside. So we'll go ahead and mark that, and then let's select all of these seams here. It doesn't matter that we've selected other ones as well, just as long as we have the ones we want selected also, we can go clear seam, and I'll take that off. Okay, but we need to make sure we get that whole loop around the leg once again, so mark that one. Okay, so now everything should be marked. We don't really need to do anything on the eyes because it'll just kind of flatten these circles out. Since they're kind of empty hemispheres, it'll kind of just squish them down. So that should be pretty good to go on the seams of our body. So we'll go ahead and tab out and go ahead and apply the mirror now. And tell you what, while we're at it, just select everything and let's slide this over so we can open up a new window over here. We're going to go to UV Image Editor, and we're going to go ahead and unwrap the UV coordinates that we had the seams for. So just hit U and unwrap, and you can see it unwraps them nicely and kind of flattens them out to where we can easily make a texture map for them. So right now they're kind of in their kind of hodgepodge, so I'm going to go UVs, average the scale, so it kind of, you can see some of them adjusted. Sometimes when you unwrap the UVs, some parts are bigger than they should be and other parts are smaller, so when you do the average scale, it kind of makes them all uniform size. And now we're going to go pack islands so it fits them inside the square a little bit better. Usually the first run it does a pretty good job, but you can sometimes tweak it a little bit by doing the average scale and then pack. Okay, so now just to do it, we'll go ahead and add a new texture to kind of have a placeholder there, but I'm going to make the coordinates 2048 instead of 1024, so we'll have a nice, large, fairly high resolution texture map. And I like to use either a color grid or a UV grid. Let's go ahead and use color grid as the background, and we'll say OK. And it creates a nice color grid. So if we come over here into the 3D viewport and turn on texture shading, you can tab out and you can see how that's being applied to our little turtle guy. So if we grab our light over here, and I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I am planning to use cycles in the final rendering version of this, but getting the texture maps and everything set up, I like to do that in the default Blender render settings because it's a lot easier to just kind of throw things together. But once we get done with all the textures and everything, we'll jump into cycles and get the texture set up in there. So, okay, so let's go ahead and save this. And tell you what, let's go ahead and save this. We'll save as image, and we'll say texture map underscore, and we're in part 3, so I'll just say part 3. And then we'll name these accordingly if we change scenes, or as the further we go into the parts. So we'll save as image, and it saves it as PNG. You can change the format if you like, but anyways. Okay, so we got that done. Now, if we come back into object mode, I guess we already were in object mode, but if we go back to solid mode, and we go ahead and collapse this window over here, we have our UV coordinates set up. Go ahead and save just in case. Now we can apply, I guess the mirror modifier is already applied, but now I want to get rid of the subsurf because I'm going to add a multi-resolution so we can sculpt with it. And I'm going to subdivide. Let's go 3 times. I might need to go a little further, but for now we'll just do 3. And there's one trick you can use. You can see the higher we subdivide, kind of the slower things react. So if I subdivided one more time into 4, it's not as smooth, maneuvering around in there as it would be, say, if we went down to 1 or. There we go. See how quick that is versus how quick that is. Now we can compensate for that by having a high resolution or high subdivided multi-resolution and a smooth transition by using the hide tool, just like you do in edit mode. So let's go to sculpt mode, and right now it's set to sculpt mode as 1. So let me pop that back up to 4. Set that to 4. Okay. So the way you hide different parts, say I just only want to work on the head right now. We'll just hit H and it brings up a crosshair. You just click and drag over the body parts that you want to hide, which would be right there. And you can see now it's behaving a lot smoother because it doesn't have to calculate all of those extra vertices there in the viewport. So you can work piece by piece. Okay, so we got our sculpt tools and mode turned on. let's turn on our symmetry down here. Let's go ahead and set the X mirror, so whenever we do something on one side, it's automatically mirrored to the other side. Let me go ahead and undo that. And instead of using the grab tool, oops, okay, thought I might have grabbed something by accident. Let's use the blob tool, because what I want to do is I'm going to go in here and add kind of some subtle scales, like around his eyes and across his skin a little bit. So one thing we can do to make it look more like a flat scale instead of a blob like the default, just kind of an upraised pimple type of lump, we can change the curve. So right now, basically what this is illustrating is the radius of the brush. So right now, if we clicked, it would come up shaped like this, and then on the other side it would go down the other way. So this is kind of the middle of the brush. So what I want is more of a flat surface. So what I'm going to do is drag these points down to be more of a flat surface. And if I'd like a sharper edge right there, so I'm going to click right there and drag that down, and maybe drag these over like so. And just kind of give it a nice flat surface. So when I click and drag now, you can see it's more of a flat circle rather than an upraised lump. Okay. Make my radius quite a bit smaller. Let's try 35. Yeah, that'd be better. And you can see it's more flat, scaly looking, sort of. Okay, now let me undo all these. Now you could go through here and take a lot of time, if you're patient, and kind of just click and then click, kind of click, 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 and kind of just draw all of them on there like that, which would be fine if you have the patience. But if you're like me, sometimes you don't have much patience. So there's a trick we can do to where we can just kind of just swipe across there and it'll add them on there. And that's going to be under your stroke options. And you see right now the spacing is set to 10%. So if I click and drag, you can kind of see a little bit of a jitter in between each one. And that's because it's set to 10% of the size of the brush. It's going to, oops, hold down Control too many times. How big does that thing get? Anyways, so if we set this down to 1%, it's a more smooth transition. But I don't want one long swipe. I want it to be kind of a dotted line. So if we set it to 100%, then it'll space it accordingly like so. You can just kind of click and drag and just kind of draw things on there. But for me, that's a little bit too far apart, so I'm going to undo that, and let's set this down to 90%. And then we can click and drag, and it'll do like so. And these are a little too high, so let's set the strength down. Let's make that about half of what it is right now, so down to 0.25. And we'll go like so. And it's still a little sharp, so let me smooth the edges of our curve right there. And that'll work a lot better. Okay, so now what I want to do is kind of add a ridge across the top of his eyebrow, like so. And you know what, maybe I'll make that a little stronger, because I want that to be raised up just a little bit more. So let's make this 0.35. Yeah, that'll work. So now you can just kind of drag across here. And just kind of drag around. It'll make some nice, symmetrical scaly looking things there. And if, like I said, you can change the distance of each space by decreasing the spacing here. Let's try 80% maybe. It'll be a lot closer together. And if you have the patience, you can go through here and cover his whole body with some of these scales. But since it's kind of a cartoon character, we'll just add them around kind of just the main parts. Then they'll kind of gently fade out. As they go. So we'll add some through here, and then Kind of liking the way this is looking. That kind of doubled on top of itself because it's the mirrored one and the normal one on top of each other. Okay, so we'll just add a few there, and then let's grab the smooth tool, and we'll come in here and set the strength down a little bit and the radius up a bit, and just kind of blend those in as they go on back, like so. And you kind of just smooth it down. Maybe a little smoother across the nose. The snout, I guess. And then tell you what, let me put a smaller row under his bottom lip here. Set the radius down a little bit smaller. About like so. And they're too close together now, so let's set the spacing a little further apart. Probably go back to 95% maybe now. Just gotta be careful with your brush strokes. And if you wanted to, like I said, you could cover his whole body with this technique. And maybe make like a Rango type of character. The chameleon instead of a turtle. Okay, go ahead and grab the smooth tool and kind of smudge that out. Okay, so we got the head pretty well smoothed out. Let me flatten that just a little bit more. Yeah, there we go. Okay, now I'm going to unhide, Alt-H, unhide the body, and now I'm going to hide the head, because we're pretty well done on that. Go ahead and save this while I'm at it. And the more resolution you add, the higher your files, the bigger your file size is going to be, so be careful if you're low on hard drive space. So we'll go ahead and hide the head now. And tell you what, I just want to work on the arms and shoulders, so I'm going to go ahead and hide the legs and lower body as well. Now if you hide half of it, say I wanted to hide, just work on this arm and hide this one, so it's, you know, I'm doing half the work, it's not going to work because it doesn't copy over if that's hidden. So we'll have to make sure those are both turned on. Okay, so go back to the blob tool. We'll come in here, zoom in on the shoulder, and kind of add some rough scales here on his shoulder. Like so. I think I might have mentioned this is sort of a same stylized as the little T-Rex character that I have put on YouTube, but this is actually a lot more detail. That guy he's a cute little guy. I like him, but he was really just a quick box model with not much detail added. So if you can get this far on the little turtle guy, then you can definitely do the T-Rex guy with no problem. Okay, so we got that. Add a little bit more smaller ones in here. Some variety. Okay, and we'll go ahead and add them on, say, the backs of his forearms. Maybe some bigger ones. And if you have a lot of variation in the size, it makes it look more more lifelike, more organic. So not all the spots are going to be the same size. Okay, so let's add a few more small ones up in here on the finger area. Okay, maybe a tiny bit around the front of the forearm. undo that one. I didn't like the way that one turned out. That may be some right down here. If you remember the alcoholic frog character that I made a while back, or the revision, I think I made him 5 or 6 different times, but the most recent one, I kind of used the same technique to give him his kind of scaly look across his arms and everything. Okay, so we got that. Let's go ahead and grab the smooth and kind of clean that up around the edges a little bit. So it's kind of just gradual smooth out, fade out, instead of just a harsh stop. Okay, maybe around these edges. A little bit in here. Okay, let's go ahead and save that. And we'll go ahead and Alt-H. You can see it's starting to take shape. Starting to look like a organic little guy. So now we can work on the lower body and the legs. So let's go ahead and hide the whole upper body. Okay. Kind of look, eyeballs look kind of weird up there all by themselves, don't they? Okay, so same thing on the arms and everything. Just get the blob tool, and we'll just start kind of painting in here on his shins. This type of work is a little more, you know, like I said on the face, you can just click and drag and draw basically little lines, but when you get down into the outer extremities, you have more control if you just kind of random to just point and click rather than trying to just draw all the scales in there. Now, if you remember on the forearms when I was working, I kind of left the inside of them a little smooth, and then the outside a little more rough, and that's just because, you know, the softer skin is not going to have as thick of the hard scales. It's more like, well, kind of like, think of it like battle armor or something like that. You just want the most vulnerable parts of the body covered up with the more hard scales and everything. And the parts that are closer inside of the body are going to be protected when they're all drawn up. It's just the outer areas that won't be. So those are the ones that would have more of the male armor, you know, chain mail, scale mail, I don't know, whatever you call it. But anyways. Okay, so that's pretty good on the legs, I think. Go ahead and grab the old smooth tool, not the inflate. There we go. And just kind of clean that up around the edges. And then clean up the back of the legs. Okay. And the rest of his body is going to be covered up by the shell, so it doesn't really need any detail added to it. So, okay, so let's go File, Save. And while we're working with the sculpt tools, let's just go ahead and come into object mode. And let's turn off the multi-res for now, just so it doesn't take up much CPU space. Save. And I'm going to Alt-H, unhide the shell. And now I'm going to hide the body, and we're going to start sculpting on the shell. Now we'll go and hide the eyeballs too. So, let's go ahead and do the same thing we did on the body. Let's go through here and add some seams. So I want to separate the front shell from the back shell, and then also the center area. So we'll select both of those there, Control E, mark the seams. And then we'll just select here along the middle. And tell you what, let's turn the subsurf off in the sculpt view. And okay, so I think on the shells, I want those to be pretty much solid circles instead of being cut in half like they are. So I'm going to deselect all of that on the front and back. And zoom in here, right there. Good. And down here, deselect that guy, and select these guys. Okay, so now I'll go Control E and mark that seam. And I think that's good on that. Let's go ahead and I think that's good. Tell you what, let's go ahead and select the top of the arm strap there, and I guess maybe down here as well, and mark those. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and apply, tab out of edit mode, go ahead and apply the mirror, split our window again, go to UV image editor, and again add a new image, same deal, 2048 by 2048, and again color grid, and we'll say OK. And this is going to be Untitled 1. So let's tell you what, let's go ahead and rename this shell texture. Tab into edit mode, select everything, go U, unwrap, and unwraps it to that, and same thing, UVs, average the scale, and then pack the islands, and everything should be good already. So if we go into texture mode there, you can kind of see how that's being mapped on there. The reason this is handy is because it has, you know, grid pattern and numbers and letters and everything that you can tell, you know, if it's being mapped out, or if it's being, what's the word I'm looking for, if it's being skewed and stretched and everything. But for the most part, it's looking in pretty decent shape. It could be a little better, but I think these will work. So anyways, let's go ahead and collapse that. Actually, tell you what, let's save this image real quick. We'll say texture map underscore shell part 3. Okay, go ahead and save that. And now we'll go ahead and collapse this. And go ahead and start working on the sculpt mode for this guy as well. Go ahead and add multi-resolution and get rid of subsurf. Let's go to solid mode. Not supported in sculpt mode. Object mode. Sculpt mode. Subdivide. There we go. You have to subdivide it a couple times for that to be supported, I guess. Okay, so we'll do 3 times. And let's start on the back shell. We'll go ahead and grab the blob tool again. And let's make sure all our settings, stroke and everything, good. Make sure our mirror, yes, okay. So I want to just add some blobs around the lip of the shell. Maybe let's undo that a little bit. Set the strength up to maybe 0.6. Make it a little stronger. Didn't seem to be having much effect. There we go. Okay, so now we have a nice ridged shell there. And now I want to add some larger circles there on the back. So let's set the radius up quite a bit. Let's make it maybe, let's try 75. Yeah. And it's a little too strong, so let's just strength down to maybe 0.25. And that's not really what I'm looking for. So I'll tell you what, let's just draw some on there. So let's grab the brush tool and set it to subtract, because we're going to draw into the shell. And I want the radius to be quite a bit smaller. So let's set it to say, let's make it 10. And then let's go to back view and just maybe a little stronger. Kind of just draw some diamond shapes in there. And it's not doing real well, so let's subdivide it one more time. Undo. There we go. That's a little better. I'll do the same thing down here. And then just kind of add some random turtle shell types of shapes. It's looking a little rough right now, but we'll come back in here with the smooth tool and kind of get it cleaned up. Okay, so that doesn't look too bad. Grab the smooth, and set the radius up pretty high, strength down a little bit. Just kind of come over here and just kind of soften up some of these rough edges. Like so. Okay, I think that'll work. You can spend more time on it if you like. So one thing you can do if you want some sharper creases there is just to grab the crease tool itself and just kind of run that in between, you know, each division there, and it'll kind of draw those edges together a little bit sharper. I like to use the crease tool when I'm making like a model of an old man. It's real fun to use that on the wrinkles and everything, so you can get some really nice definition on them. You set the radius down a little bit smaller to make it a little more focused. Oops, too much. Oh, the strength went way up, didn't it? Okay. I'll just undo that. But let's do a couple more things with the blob tool. Now that we have the basic shell shape there, we can come in, make the straight radius down a little bit, and maybe just add some more roughness to it. Then you can use the polish tool to kind of come in here and kind of flatten some of these surfaces out. Kind of works like the smooth tool, but rather than smoothing everything, it kind of just compresses it down. Okay, that'll work for the back of the shell, I think. And for the front, it won't nearly be as detailed. Let's grab the brush tool again, same deal. Make it quite a bit smaller. And just kind of, tell you what, let me turn off the mirror right now, because I just want to add a line right down the middle. For the most part, it's not very straight, but that's okay. It's a cartoon character. And then we'll smooth it up a little bit. Actually, before we smooth it up, let's go and turn the mirror back on, and then just kind of add some general shapes over here. Maybe one line down like that, almost like a like a six-pack abs or something, but not quite. Okay, so now we'll smooth this up just a tad. Like so. Maybe grab the crease tool, get some of that, set the strength down, the radius. There we go. Okay, and tell you what, let's go ahead and grab the blob tool again and kind of do the bumped edge of the front of the shell as well. Set the radius way down, and we'll just kind of come in here, set the strength up some more. Undo that. Yeah, there we go. And there we go. Okay, now inside here, it's not going to be real visible. I mean, it will be, but trying to decide what we want to do with that. Maybe we'll just add a few subtle scales in there, around like so. Oops, kind of did too much overlap. Okay, now I got the smooth tool. Oops, where's it at? What's going on here? Computer's slowing down on me. Saying, yeah, you're doing too much work. Cannot keep up. My computer has a German accent. Set the strength up just a little. Okay. Get this cleaned up, and then we'll be done with part 3. These are turning into a little bit longer than I had originally planned, but what do you do? Okay, so that'll be it for the shell. So we'll come back into object mode, and we're going to Alt-H. Okay, and before we call this done, let's go ahead and bake these sculpts to the textures so we can use them as a normal map instead of having to have this high resolution mesh. So let's go ahead and split that window, go to our UV image editor. We'll start with the body first. Remember, we have the untitled. Let's go ahead and name that. What did we have the other one named? I forgot already. Shell texture, so we'll call this one body texture. Okay, and now let's go ahead and turn the multi-res on, and we'll go to the camera icon right there, which is the render settings, and come all the way down to where it says bake, and just go ahead and expand that window out. And the bake mode is going to be normals, and we want to bake them from the multi-res, so we'll go ahead and select that, and let's give it a margin of 5. Okay, so now when we hit bake, it's going to take the data from that multi-res sculpt, and it's going to bake it to our texture over here. So sometimes it takes a minute. Bake. There it goes. And it didn't put anything on there, I think, because if we go back over here, well, everything's turned on. Tell you what, let me pause recording and kind of play with this and kind of figure out why it's not converting the multi-res to the normal. So I'll be right back. Okay, I got it figured out. It's kind of an odd solution, but at least it works. What the problem is when I go from trying to bake the multi-res, for some reason the preview has to be at least one lower than the sculpt and render. Or I guess the render doesn't really matter at this point, but the preview has to be lower than the sculpt. So if we go back over to our render settings and everything's the same, just hit bake. You'll see the multi-res bake up here. Now you can see all that detail we sculpted in there. You can see all that. So now, if I go image, save image, take it a second. Come on, computer, what are you going so slow for all of a sudden? Oh, so this saved as the body texture. Actually, what I was wanting to do was save as image. So I would go texture map, actually change that to, instead of texture, we're going to name it normal map, part 3. I'm not sure the parts are really important at this juncture, but that'll help keep it separated, I guess. So let's go ahead and turn that off for the body. And then we'll grab the shell and do the same thing. Make sure we get the right image in the window over here. And actually make sure, okay, preview now is set to 0, so that should definitely work. So now we'll go bake here, and it should bake all that. Multi-res, preview subdivision. Okay, so at least has to be at least one preview, but it can't be the same amount as the sculpt. So learn something new every day, right? So now we'll go bake. And that's quick and easy. So now we'll go image, save as image, and we'll name this with normal map underscore shell underscore part 3. So now, and it'll take it a second. And there we go. So now, theoretically, we could go ahead and delete these multi-res modifiers, but I like to just turn them off until I know for sure I don't need them anymore. So in the meantime, we'll go ahead and add a subdivision surface back on there on both of these. And we'll call this part 3 done because we're running up on 45 minutes. That's quite a while to sit there and listen to me ramble on. So, okay, so we got quite a bit accomplished today, or in this part. So we'll save this, and this will be the end of part 3. Part 4 we'll get in, and we'll actually start adding some color and texture to them. Maybe work on the eyeballs some more as well. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in part 4.